team, this is Professor Foreman, and this is video 1 of 3 as we look at strategic human resource management. The objectives for these videos should, by the time you're done, you should be able to describe the differences between strategy formulation and implementation, list the components of strategic management process, discuss the role of HRM function in strategy formulation, and describe the linkages between HRM and strategy formulation. The goal of strategic management in an organization is to deploy and allocate resources in a way that gives it a competitive advantage. As you can see, 2 of the 3 classes of resources, organizational and human, are directly tied to the human resource management function. And some of the major competitive challenges require companies to take a proactive strategic approach in the marketplace. To be maximally effective, the HRM function must be integrally involved in the company's strategic management process. And this means that HR managers should, 1, have input into the strategic plan, both in terms of people-related issues and in terms of the ability of the human resource pool to implement particular strategic alternatives. 2, they should have specific knowledge of the organization's strategic goals. And 3, they should know what types of employee skills, behaviors, and attitudes are needed to support the strategic plan. And lastly, 4, to develop programs to ensure that employees have those skills, behaviors, and attitudes. So what's a business model? It's a story of how the firm will create value for customers and, more important, how it will do so profitably. We often hear of or read of companies that have, quote, transformed their business model in one way or another. But what that means is not always clear. And to understand this, we need to grasp a few basic accounting concepts. First, fixed costs are generally considered the costs that are incurred regardless of the number of units produced. Second, you have a number of variable costs, which are those costs that they'll vary directly with the units produced. Third is the concept of contribution margins or margins. And margins are the difference between what you charge for your product and the variable cost of that product. They're called contribution margins because they are what contributes to your ability to cover your fixed cost. Fourth, the gross margin is the total amount of margin you made and is calculated as the number of units sold times the contribution margin. So this is the accounting concepts that play into that. When we're looking at strategic management, it's more than a collection of strategic types. It's a process for analyzing a company's competitive situation, developing the company's strategic goals, and devising a plan of action and allocation of resources, which are human and organizational and physical, that will increase the likelihood of achieving these goals. This kind of strategic approach should be emphasized in HR management. HR managers should be trained to identify the competitive issues the company faces with regard to human resources and think strategically about how to respond. When we're looking at strategic HR management, it's a process for analyzing a company's competitive situation, developing the company's strategic goals, and devising a plan of action and allocation of resources that will help a company achieve its goals. See, there's a tie-in. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. The components of strategic management process. We're looking at strategy formulation, and that's the strategic planning groups that decide on strategy. And strategy implementation is where the organization follows through on the strategy. They're actually now making things happen. Both strategic management phases must be performed effectively, and the process doesn't happen sequentially. When you look at Figure 2.2, it presents the strategic management process. And you can see where we can have our missions and our goals and our strategic choice and our human resource needs, but you see that tie-in where it comes from our external analysis. We're looking at those opportunities and threats. And you guys will be, of course, learning and exploring SWOT analysis in this class. So you'll be looking at those external factors, and then your internal factors are your strengths and weaknesses. Those then feed into the strategic choice that is being made. When we're looking over at implementation and you're looking at the various practices of recruitment and training and job analysis and job design and benefits and employee relations, those will feed into what your HR capabilities and actions are. So under capabilities is skills and abilities and knowledge, which we have in reverse, we call them KSAs. And we have our actions, which are our behaviors and the results. And the results can be productivity, the absenteeism, it could be turnover. And with our actions, that will factor into our performance. Based on our behaviors and our results, we will then either have high or low productivity, and the quality and profitability will be high or low depending on our actions. From performance, we evaluate our strategy, and then we consider the emergent strategies and how that is then reformulated as time progresses. There is a linkage between HRM and the strategic management process. And the strategic choice really consists of answering questions about competition. That is, how the firm will compete to achieve its mission and goals. And these decisions consist of addressing the issues of where to compete, how to compete, and with what to compete. There are 4 levels of integration that exist between the HRM function and the strategic management function. There's administrative linkage, one-way linkage, two-way linkage, and integrative linkage. Administrative linkage is the lowest level of interaction. HRM's function's attention is focused on day-to-day activities. In the one-way linkage, the firm's strategic business planning function is going to develop the strategic plan, then inform the HRM function of the plan. And although one-way linkage does recognize the importance of human resource in implementing the strategic plan, it precludes the company from considering HR issues while formulating the strategic plan. This level of integration often leads to strategic plans that the company cannot successfully implement. And companies with integrative linkage have their HRM functions built right into the strategy formulation and implementation processes. With two-way linkage, it allows for consideration of HR issues during the strategy formulation process, and they are interdependent. They can stand alone, and they can also depend on each other, lean on each other. So those are the 4 levels of integration. The levels of linkage will be discussed in relation to the different components of strategic management, and you can see their linkages illustrated here in figure 2.4. We have our administrative linkage that has the strategic planning and HRM function. We see the one-way linkage of where it is how it ties in. So you see that the break between, and then you see that in the two-way, they're flowing in both directions. And then you integrate them. You now bring them together as one, as part of the puzzle, right? You bring those puzzle pieces together. So that is the end of video 1. Go and find video 2, and I will see you shortly.